Good evening, Vancouver. Welcome back to Canucks After Dark, June 19th. We are on the other side of a Stanley Cup champion being awarded for the year. We are just around the corner from the NHL draft, from free agency, and we got some Canucks stuff to talk about today. But as always, joined by my co-host, Canuck Clay. How are you doing today, Clay?
I am great, Parker. Thank you. I hope you are well, too. I guess we actually found a topic to talk about tonight, which is good. I know last week we were joking about, well, we have things to talk about for the summer. So at least we have one big one.
Yeah, we knew we had the draft coming up, which is, when's that again? That's next
29.
Wednesday.
Yeah,
So we knew that we would be good for the show on the 26th and the show on July 3rd, because both of those would have draft stuff to talk about, and then free agency, of course, for the week after. But this one, we did get some Canucks news sort of out of the blue. It was, Friday that came out? The Canucks are going to be buying out OEL. There's some more stuff around Ethan Bear's shoulder. There's some just talk around what the Canucks are going to do defenseman-wise for this next season, because, as has been the case for a while, the defense doesn't look great, and the Canucks have some work to do.
It's funny. We can talk about whether it looks better or worse now, like with the results. And man, we're going to talk about this. We talked last week about right shot D, third line center. How about now left shot D? We need that as well.
Yeah, the Canucks have holes. They have quite a few holes, but now they have a little bit of flexibility to maneuver with those. So we'll probably start with Canucks talk. We'll start with a conversation around Oliver Ekman-Larsson. We'll get into Ethan Bear, Kyle Burroughs. We'll talk a bit about, I guess, the Stanley Cup Final, which ended last Tuesday. So we haven't done our sort of playoff wrap up. And then and then we'll take some viewer questions when we get towards the end there, unless I'm missing anything. But
no, that's good.
It should be a good place to start.
Absolutely. And I was thinking, though, if we wrap up the Stanley Cup Final pretty quick, because we could do that first for one. We could reverse the order and just spend 5 minutes, because I think we want to hear about your experience down there. Let's do that if that's cool.
Sure. Yeah, it was a fun time. Yeah, we got into Vegas around noon on the day of the Stanley Cup Final. I did the little check for tickets at $2,500. Okay, I'll pass. That's a little rich for me right now. So. Yeah. So we had basically we were doing a trade show, so we had to go set everything up. We were done around 3:00. Went to this place called Beer Park. It's a bar in the Paris Hotel, sort of half outside, half inside. Our table was sort of right on the edge of outside inside, which is great because it was 34 degrees outside, so you didn't really want to be sitting outside for 4 hours. We just had a few pitchers, had a few appies, watched the game. The place was going crazy. They had the sound all the way up. It was. There was a lot of joy in that. We were talking to one guy who was there with his kid. His kid was probably like 7, and they were having a great time. And it was a lot of fun until about 3 minutes after the game ended. And then I got sad. I got jealous. I was like, man, this is like seeing all these people celebrating and being, so excited that their team has won. And I'm just thinking, that would be nice. That'll be nice one day for that to be us. But no, it was a lot of fun. Didn't go out anywhere afterwards, but it was cool to be in town when it happened. Be surrounded by people cheering on their team to win. I was secretly rooting for Florida in my heart at the time, but it was a cool experience.
You're a good storyteller, Parker, because the way you set that up when you said, and then it was fine until about 3 minutes after the game, and then I thought you were going to say someone pulled a gun or someone.
No, it wasn't. No, everything was good down there. Okay. Everything was fine.
Yeah. You actually felt sad.
Yeah, I just felt it might have been we had 4 pitchers between the 3 of us over the course of the game, so it might have been that doing the talking. But we didn't have to be at the trade show till 11 o'clock the next morning, so we were good. It might have been that doing a bit of the talking, but that's fair. It was just like I want this, right? I want to be in a place with thousands of other people cheering for the Canucks. Hopefully, just the sense of joy and relief that would come with that. And I was sort of seeing them, and I was like, you guys don't even know, right? Like a bit of that too, right? A lot of the people there and we had talked to quite a few of them. They were like, yeah, we never really watched hockey until they came here, right?
Yeah.
And the team's been good, and that is they've really cultivated a great fan base there, and it's good for them. But wish that could be us.
With all due respect to the BC Lions and the CFL, I did go to a Grey Cup to see them win. But if we're talking about major sports, my experience with championships, you guys, I was at Game 7 when we lost to Boston. But I was also exactly 4 years ago, from 2 days ago, I was actually in Toronto for the Toronto Raptors victory parade, which is downtown, which is kind of cool, actually,
Yeah,
but
that's fun.
Yeah, it was good. So that's my closest experience to experiencing a championship live in a city where they won it.
Yeah. I mean, just championship wise, like I had Seattle in 2013, right?
Yep.
The Seahawks, I guess it was 2014 February.
You were down there?
No, but I wasn't down there, right? Like I was just like, that's
okay,
the
right.
one time that my
Yes.
team has won.
Yes.
But even that wasn't the same, right? Because I'd only been a Seahawks fan for about 6 years at that point. It wasn't the same level.
Yep.
But one day it'll be here. I'll be there.
Yeah,
And,
we'll be doing a show right from the concourse as soon as they're done.
yeah, hopefully in maybe in 12 months from now, but very likely not.
Hopefully we'll still be friends by then.
Maybe this team will have torn us apart by then.
So overall, good experience, and then the rest of your
Great time.
trip was fine. And we hear stories, Parker, like it's Vegas, it's not the biggest hockey town, but they just won a championship. Did you feel for the next couple of days that you were there? Was there a buzz, no buzz, a bit of a buzz? How would you describe it?
A little bit. There was. Yeah. I noticed a lot of Vegas jerseys around, and it was 35 degrees outside. Like you have to commit to throw on a Mark Stone jersey.
Yeah.
I mean the second night, second night and last night, the World Series of Poker was being played in our hotel. So I went downstairs just to watch a final table that was going on, and one of the guys was in a Mark Stone shirt. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Like there's he was a local here, and it was neat.
Cool.
But yeah,
cool.
there was definitely a bit of pride going around it, and I think. I'm in a lot of the touristy spots, right? I'm in the hotels, right? Our trade show was at Caesar's Palace, and our hotel was, on the Strip, right? We weren't hanging out with a lot of locals there, but we did see a lot of people repping the Golden Knights, and I mean, you saw the parade and the scenes from that. Like they definitely have a fan base going.
Awesome. So then you get home on Thursday night or Friday morning?
Sort of both.
And then you got to
1:30 in the morning. Yeah.
Fire up the vlogging machine because you had some news to talk. We all had some news to talk about. It was exciting. Out of the blue.
1 p.m. Elliot Friedman on Friday, June 16th, tweets out, "There's word this afternoon that Vancouver will buy out Oliver Ekman-Larsson. He will be an unrestricted free agent." Now, is this super surprising? I mean, it's a little surprising, right? We knew it was one of the ways they could get out of it. The other being like shedding a guy like Anthony Beauvillier or maybe a Connor Garland, which we've sort of agreed is not the best move.
Yep.
But from all the things that we've heard, teams weren't budging with the Canucks. They were saying, "Well, you guys have sort of found yourself in a bit of a pickle. Maybe not Alavine specifically, but the Canucks themselves have." And you're going to have to pay a premium to get out of that. And all the teams sort of collectively agreed not necessarily like conspired, but, had their own thought of like, well, you guys are in a tough spot. You're going to have to pay a premium if you want to get out of that. And this was sort of the Canucks' one way of controlling their own fate, getting themselves somewhat out of this jam. So, I mean, let's just talk about the math behind it to start.
Sure. And just before we do that, Parker, because I know your video was really good about breaking down the math, I was just rambling on the side of a random road in Vancouver, so I had none of the numbers in front of me. But I got to tell you, man, how I found out. This is so funny. I was at lunch with Jason, one of my channel sponsors, and we were just talking, and we were good. We weren't checking our phones or whatever. And then I was driving back to my office, and I called my son Sean just to say, checking on him, see how I was doing it. And he goes, and we were about to hang up, and then he goes, "Oh, I thought you were going to call me about the OEL buyout." I said, "What?" He got bought out. So then, I pull over to the side of the road. I checked my Twitter. I said, "What the heck?" So I didn't even know because I was being a good table mate at lunch. So yes, I'm glad you got a video out quickly with some actual numbers and not just my flabbergastedness.
Yeah. So OEL was getting paid $8.25 a year was his cap hit. Canucks there's 12% retained, so it was like 7.2 or something like that, 7.26, I want to say. But essentially, now cap hit wise, I don't understand why the math works like it does.
Right.
I don't know why it's different in different years. That doesn't really make sense to me. But essentially, this year, their cap hit drops to $147,000.
That's pretty good. So
they get the entire relief, essentially, of the Oliver Ekman-Larsson contract this year. Next year, it's 2.35. So again, about $6 million or about $5 million saved there. And then 4.76 for years 3 and 4. So both of those years, about $2.5 million saved. So just on that, that's a good start, right? It clears up some space, and ideally, with caps going up maybe next year after, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
The only downside to that is you're then paying him for 4 extra years at 2.127 for 4 years after that. So about $9 million over, or I guess a little less than that, 8.5 over 4 years after that, which hurts. But we're used to it, right? We had the Luongo recapture. We had the Holtby buyout, the Virtanen buyout. Like the Canucks haven't had a clean cap in quite a while. This is nothing new, but it really does open up some flexibility for them this year.
Awesome. As we're talking about numbers, Sager's Rage, thank you for your number. Your $10 donation says, save the cap space for Pettersson, trade Miller and Myers after his bonus. This team is not ready to be a playoff team or to contend. So we will get to all those things, but thank you, Sager's Rage, for that generous donation. So great. You explained that well, Parker. I think, in essence, if you're looking at the 7.25 that we owed him times 4 years, right? When you take away Arizona's part, you're looking at, we owed him in essence $29 million, and now we only owe him 2/3 of that $29 million. So people are talking about this $19 million number, which is fair, and that we actually save about $9.5 to $10 million. So so we're basically paying, as someone said in the chat, $19 million to OEL to go away, and then don't forget, you guys, he can sign with any other team. He can sign for $1 million, $2 million a year because he's already getting $19 million from us over the next, 8 years. Parker, how does he get?
Yep.
Yeah. So, wow. So there's so many ways to look at this. Aquilini's commitment, basically fixing Benning's mistake, what the Canucks can do with this money. So where do you want to go? What's the most intriguing part to you?
First off, I want to laugh at how this affects Arizona. Because it's a really silly rule that probably will get changed, I imagine. Because it's so basically, you know how retained salary works, right? You get 3 at a time. You can retain up to 3 separate salaries in trades.
3 slots, basically. Yeah,
3 slots. But since Arizona retained 12% on OEL's contract for the 4 years, now that he has been bought out, that actually uses their retention slot for all 8 years, which I think is a really dumb rule because that really bites that team. But I did think that was funny. But yeah, maybe we should go into sort of what the Canucks can do with that, right? Because now if you look at it, you're like, oh, the Canucks have $6.5 million at cap space. Throw in LTIR, they're at over 12. Like there's some room to really maneuver. But then you start to look at some of the holes, right? I mean, now they really only have 4 defensemen.
If that. Yeah, 3, 4.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, that includes Guillaume Brisebois because that's what cap friendly includes. But yeah, they have essentially 3 NHL defensemen on their roster in Quinn Hughes, Tyler Myers, and Philip Bronick. And we don't know if Tyler Myers is making it to October. So the Canucks definitely have a lot of work to do. But what's your reaction to that happening? And what do you think that's going to allow them to accomplish?
Yeah, great points. So I love the way you broke it down. And I think it's okay for Canucks fans, Parker, to be upset that they made that trade 2 summers ago, right? But you're also allowed to be happy or at least hopeful with that the Canucks can do something. I see so many people, Parker, they're almost not allowed, or they're chastising people for being hopeful because say, oh yeah, but we shouldn't have made that trade in the first. Yeah, we all know that, but you can't undo something that happened 2 years ago. And like you said, this was probably the best way to get out of it. It's fascinating. They didn't go to OEL's agent and say, hey, will you waive your no move clause? On the first day that you could do a buyout, they did it. So to me, Parker, that tells me that Patrick Allvin has been thinking about this for a while. That means they're ready for it, and they see themselves as being a player. It might be a little bit delusional, but they see themselves as being a player this year. And like you said, 6 up to 12 with LTIR if they do it properly. At least they have options now, whereas a week ago they had no options.
Yeah, it's like if you really break it down to the bare minimum, it's a simple value proposition, right?
Yeah.
So you keep Oliver Ekman-Larsson, you pay him $29 million over 4 years, right? On your cap. Is he, or you buy him out and you pay him $19 million. So it's really 29 versus 19. So over the 4 years that he would be playing for you, is he worth that dead cap? Essentially, is he worth the $2.5 million difference per year that you would basically be paying to not buy him out? The answer is probably no.
No.
He's probably not worth $2.5 million a year. He's probably, honestly, if he gets a league minimum contract somewhere, like, he's not going to be a lock to make that team potentially, right? So essentially, for the Canucks, it makes sense, right? Is it the right move? Probably. It's a way to open up some cap space for this year, because this year is, they are really locked up cap-wise without immediately having to get rid of the 11th overall pick or having to get rid of Connor Garland and an asset just to clear that cap space. So one big thing that this really does for the Canucks and what some of the talk has been is it doesn't necessarily like make the team better right now. You're not going to say, okay, we now have, what was it, $6.5 million of cap space. We're going to go spend it. We're going to go get a guy, because they can't, right? Basically, they have handcuffed themselves to a degree where they need that cap space to have some flexibility, to be able to go to a team and say, hey, we now want to trade Connor Garland or Anthony Beauvillier. But we don't need somebody to say yes, right? We have some leverage back. We have a little bit of wiggle room. Like, hey, if you don't want to do that, that's fine. We have other ways of getting out of this jam, right? Yeah. It's not as much of a jam anymore. And at that point, it starts to make a lot more sense to me as to why that was the move that they made. However, they have, on a 23-man roster, they have 17 guys right now. They are going to need to throw some bodies into the mix really quick. Yeah.
And that is such a good point, because we say $6.5 million, $12 million without TIR, but don't count the LTIR yet. $6.5 million is not enough to sign. We're not just talking about a third line center, a left shot D and a right shot D. We're talking about 3 more roster spots, as you just mentioned. We got to sign at least 6 guys, not 3 guys. And we want 2 or 3 of those guys to be good. So $6.5 million is not going to cut it. So you're right. You're absolutely right. There's got to be another move. We don't know what it is, but there's got to be another move coming. And this move with OEL at least gives us options to make that second move. So we're not, you're exactly how you said, we're not kind of over a barrel, so to speak, or you don't have basically other GMs laughing at us and having us right where they want us kind of thing. So that overall, Parker, I'm actually intrigued at what Alvin's going to do. I don't think he's done anything horrible. Like, he's not afraid to make trades. Horvat, Hronek, we've seen all this. Yeah. So I'm kind of excited, maybe too strong a word, but I'm intrigued for sure. For sure.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because you can look at it and be like, okay, well, you can like bring up Wolainen maybe as your number 6, right?
Yeah.
But, and we're thinking of, they have 3 defensemen, they need 3 more. But no, you probably want 7, right? Most teams carry 14 and 7 or 13 and 8.
Didn't we use like 14 of them last year? Like 14 or 15 guys last year?
Right. Yeah. So you probably need another forward, and you probably need 4 defensemen just to put on your NHL roster. That's not including the rest. So you can pull up Wolainen. That's going to be $775 onto your cap. So very minor chunk, but that's probably not ideal, right? Are you wanting to go Cole McWard, Akito Hirose, Noah Juleson if he gets signed? Like, are these guys you want to be regulars in the lineup?
Hirose for me.
For a team that has playoff ambitions, though, probably not. Like, that seems like you need some guys to really step up in that case, right? And Ethan Bear, I mean, we know now he's probably not playing till December, and we'll get to that later.
Yes.
But even if he is an option for you, like, he's not an option quite yet. So it's they're not out of the woods. That is for sure.
Parker, one point of clarification that I saw some people tweeting about. With LTIR, is it true that you have to start the season under the cap with, quote, no LTIR space? Like Pullman and Pearson have to count in the 83.5 before you can actually move them. So you have to kind of waive someone and do all these paper transactions. Do you know for sure?
That's what I thought it was, but that doesn't seem right. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I hear you.
This is what it says. If a team is cap compliant on opening day without using LTIR, then the LTIR pool is the cap hit of the LTIR player. So basically, you can then go over by that amount. If a team is not cap compliant on opening day without using LTIR, the LTIR pool is the amount that the team exceeds the cap. So, for example, if a team is $3 million over the cap and places a player on LTIR for the $4 million cap hit on opening roster, the LTIR pool is the $3 million the team exceeded the cap with. So it sounds to me, just by reading this, because it's a little tricky, it sounds to me like you can be over, but it's not ideal. You get a little bit punished for it.
Okay.
Because again, you're not accruing any cap space, right?
Yeah.
Like that's if you're a team that wants to be in the playoffs, right? Like you're gonna want to be accruing cap space. Because what happens if someone gets like you have 3 people who are injured but not injured enough to go on IR, right? Like suddenly bring someone up causes problems. You go over the cap, et cetera, et cetera. It can get pretty messy.
Okay. So ideally, they should be cap compliant, including Pullman and Pearson's contracts, correct?
Ideally.
Ideally.
That seems kind of unlikely at this point. They'd have to find a way to get out of a most to me, Beauvillier, like that's the easy peasy, like he hasn't been here for long. No one's really attached to him. He was very okay in his time here, but didn't really stand out. Maybe he's worth the money, but probably not. I don't know. I wouldn't be too upset if he was the one to go.
Okay. And Angus is there. If you want to max out on LTIR, you need to be under. So that kind of goes with what we were saying. Thank you.
You get punished if you're not. Yep.
Oh my. Okay.
And keep in mind, like we're talking like, oh yeah, they have 12 forwards rostered, right? That's including Kravtsov. I don't know why he's included as an RFA, but I guess he is. But that also includes Sheldon Dries, Jack Studnicka, Phil DiGiuseppe, Dakota Joshua, Niels Oman, Vasily Podkolzin. That's a lot of guys who haven't been doing too much. Yeah. Right? Does that sound like the bottom 6 of a playoff team?
No.
Probably not.
And the thing is, Parker, you kind of feeding into this point that we've made a few times on the show. The Canucks have no mid-range contracts. You read all those 6 players who are under $1 million.
All under $1 million, yeah.
And then it shoots up to Beauvillier, 4.15. Garland, Kuzmenko, Besser, 6, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way up to 8. So there's no forward that makes between $1 and $4 million right now.
Yeah, except Tanner Pearson, but he's on LTIR.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
So,
and on D, Quinn Hughes, 7.8, Myers, 6, Hronek 4.4, boom, Breezeball 7.75.
Yeah, and then Wolanin's also 7.75.
Yeah.
I guess technically Cole McWard's technically 9.22.
Oh, good for him.
So does that make him? Does that mean he's the 4th highest paid defenseman on the Vancouver Canucks, other than Tucker Pullman?
Yeah. Wow.
That seems impressive, but also terrible.
Oh man, that's wow. There's a lot there.
So this is going to be a team that's very dependent on goaltending.
Yep.
Is what I'm understanding. They're going to need to score a lot. They're going to need some good goaltending because they have $12 million to make all of this work, and there has to be more dominoes to fall, right? But they've really liked paying wingers, right? Look, we loved Andrei Kuzmenko. He was so good last year, but trading him for like a first and a second round pick or something last year, having that $5.5 million would be big, right? Just for depth, because they have so much top end, right? JT Miller, fantastic. Elias Pettersson, fantastic. Kuzmenko's great. Besser's been iffy, but he has some potential. Connor Garland has been pretty good, especially at 5-on-5. He hasn't played any power play time essentially. And then there's just that huge drop off. You basically go from a bunch of first and second liners to a bunch of fourth liners in an instant.
And then on D, we kind of joked about it with Hughes, Hronik, and Myers up top, and then Breezeball and Crude below. The one guy, it just says Pullman and Pearson would be those mid-range guys. I guess the other one is Ethan Bear. I know we're going to talk about them in a few minutes, but again, that big discrepancy between your stars, so-called stars, and then your replacement players, basically.
Which is better, to be fair. It's better than having a bunch of those not great players making $3 million, right?
True, like a Dickinson, right.
Or like Roussel and Beagle, like the good old days, right?
Oh yeah, those guys.
Like that was bad. I'd much rather have Niels Oman making $883 over, Jay Beagle making $3 million, right? Was Jay Beagle a little better? Sure. Was he, 3x? Probably not.
No.
So, it's again, you're going to do a lot better overpaying the good players and underpaying the bad players. There just needs to be a bit of balance and hopefully roster or ways to round out this roster a little bit.
Sure. And before we get to Ethan Bear and Kyle Burroughs, one other thing, Parker, when you were explaining the cap hit, the savings, and the dead money when it comes to OEL, another point that I think is a really good point that I've heard some people make is the more you really got to keep this 11th overall pick and hope this player hits in a year or two when OEL's contract becomes a little bit more punitive, because you're going to have to find efficiencies like a Hoglander, like a Podkolzin and Kuzmenko last year. You're going to need to find those type of efficiencies for sure.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the big thing with entry-level contracts, right? Like and even when you're in your RFA years, right? Like you get a deal, right? Mm-hmm. Like what does Elias Pettersson make? 7.35 this year?
Yeah.
And he's going to probably produce $14 million of value, right? Like that's going to be a huge boon for the team because he's an RFA. When you get to the guys who are UFAs, that's when it gets more expensive, right? Like I just think about Connor Bedard on Chicago this year, right? His cap hit's going to be like $1 million. And he's probably going to put up maybe 60 points, maybe more. Yep. I don't know. And that's going to be, wasted value, most likely. But it's going to be a big chunk of value. But yeah, if you can get a guy, and it's a bit tougher because it seems like they might be leaning defensemen, as we talked about last week. Mm-hmm. Those guys, they don't usually step in for a couple of years. But yeah, if you're able to get a guy who steps in next year or the year after, and you start to get some value out of that $900K, $1 million contract, yeah, that is a big help. To replace that value that's being essentially lost on the buyout. Yes.
You want to talk about defensemen and go to Ethan Bear now?
Yeah, so I think we talked about his surgery last week.
We did.
But I think the consensus at the time was like 4 to 6 months, and we were like, 4 months, that's the start of the season, right? Like, that's fine. October 12th? That's great. That's what the season starts October 12th every year now. So he'll miss maybe a couple weeks of the season. He'll be good to go. He'll miss training camp, which will be bad. But, it's a shoulder. You should be able to work out, do cardio, skate with a non-contact jersey on. Like, he'll be fine. Mm-hmm. But now it's 6 months. And suddenly we're not talking about missing training camp anymore, right? We're talking about missing training camp and the first 25 games of the season, maybe 30 games of the season, maybe a little more, right? Now we're talking about a guy who, as an RFA, might not even be worth qualifying.
Isn't that crazy? I think
it is crazy. Honestly, let me preface this by saying, what's his qualifying offer? It's 2.4?
2.2, I thought. Or maybe it's 2.4.
Okay.
Maybe it's
2.4. Cap friendly says 2.4.
Okay, yeah, go that.
So, because his contract was $2 million and it's 120% of that.
Okay.
So 2.4. Yeah, is Ethan Bear worth 2.4 on a 1 year? Again, it's kind of tricky considering he's probably only playing 55 games this year, but you can LTI it for the first couple months. They're already going to be in LTI anyways, right? Most likely. I don't think that matters that much. But Ethan Bear's worth 2.4. I think, right? Like, I think he was quite good in his time here, right? He's the fourth. No, he might be the third best defenseman on this roster right now, right? Like, you're going to put up against Tyler Myers, and maybe there's a bit of a fight there, but maybe not much of one. I mean, is Ethan Bear with 2.4? Absolutely, but can this team afford to give him 2.4 is the question.
Right.
Right. Are you going to be able to go longer term and say, well, we'll give you maybe 3 years at like 2, but is he going to want that, or is he going to want to do a 1-year prove-it deal, get to UFA, and then say, all right, now I'm a UFA, now I'm going to make my money and hopefully have a great year this year and hit free agency and collect.
Right. So let's go through the options here. I do not think the Canucks offer more than a year. Okay, because I just think I'd be iffy with the shoulder. Do that 1 year QO or whatever. And it's somewhere, anywhere between 2 and 2.5 million, whatever you guys decide on, fine. And then, so there's that option. If the Canucks qualify him, he can either accept it or decline it. And if you decline it, that's fine. That's what he did with his last one with Carolina. You can then negotiate outside of the realms of that 2.4. So that's fine too. Or, as you said, the Canucks could simply not qualify him. What's the risk? The risk is, well, that means he becomes a free agent and he can go to any other team who is willing to take a shot. If you can still negotiate with the Canucks, he needs a contract by December 1st or whatever the cutoff is, or else he can't play. So, and he's not healthy. So there's so many things, Parker. But then if you don't qualify him, you say, well, there's $2.5 million that we can add to our little pool that we weren't expecting. So,
right. And if you don't qualify him, that December 1st deadline doesn't exist.
Of course,
right?
Right. Yes. But don't you have to sign a contract to be able to play overall in the league?
He could sign a contract in March if you wanted to. Just as an RFA, you can't. You can't. As an RFA, you have to have a contract by December 1st.
Gotcha.
Otherwise, you're disqualified for the year.
Okay. So if you're Patrick O'Veen, what do you do?
Yeah, it's tricky, right? I think what's the QO deadline? I imagine it's right before free agency, right?
Yeah, I think you have to qualify by June 30th. You have to give the offer by June 30th.
June 30th at 2 p.m. Pacific.
Oh, very specific.
So I think at that point, you try to negotiate right up to that, right? Like, you sort of have it in your back pocket. You don't tell them, like, hey, we're going to give you the QO at that time, because then that's an option for them. But you can sort of say, hey, we're not sure yet, but maybe we'll do, would you be up for 2 years at 1.9? Right? Maybe try to save a few bucks this year, give him an extra year, right? Try to entice him. Because, you can negotiate up to that deadline, right? And you don't have to offer him 2.4. You just do to keep him as an RFA. So that could happen, right? They could say, okay, well, we sort of have you penciled in as a 1.8 guy, but we'll give you the extra year, right? Or they could say, we're not planning on qualifying you. We'll offer you a year at $2 million or 1.8 or whatever that might be. And he might look at the market and say, 1 more year of a flat cap. Maybe I just take the 1 year deal, get to when the salary cap goes up, and maybe I can fetch a few $100,000 more, and I'll go with that. Or maybe he's looking and saying, yeah, my agent's sort of done some poking around and no one else is really offering more than, or thinking about doing more than 2, right? And then, there's a lot of stuff that can happen in relation to that. And, the player might want to side with staying where he's comfortable, but we don't know.
That's a really good point. The earlier you sign, the less your contract's going to be prorated and you're making more money, obviously. That's a really good point, actually. Because what he should just take it, depending on what the offer is, take it, rehab, work hard, and you're right, take a little less this year, knowing exactly what you said. Salary cap's going up. He plays well from December onwards, and he puts himself in line for a bigger contract, a bigger annual contract for the next season.
Yeah, it really just depends on whether they think they're going to get qualified or not. That's what it's down. Because if you think you are, then just hold off and take the 2.4. Yep. But if you're not, then you might just take the best offer and not have to deal with free agency. Because is Ethan Bear going day 1 of free agency? Probably not, right?
Not if he's not playing until December.
No, it's probably going to be the big names, and a team who has some room left over might make that move, later on in July.
So if you're a Bear, are you hoping for a qualifying offer? Well, I guess there's no harm, right? You can say yes or no.
Probably. Well, you can't really say no, right?
You can reject it.
You can reject it, but then you're in sort of purgatory, right?
Yeah.
Where you can get an offer from another team, I guess an offer sheet.
Yeah.
But again, we know how common those are. But he could get the QO. That's security, right? And then he could say no and try to negotiate something else at that point.
Wow. Wow. What a turn of events. And Parker, you know when it happened, right? At the end, like in the last second of that quarterfinal against Finland, that the game was in hand.
Yeah.
And apparently this is an old injury from 4 years ago, though.
Yeah, I'll give you the quote from Rick Dollywall today. Sources indicate it's not a slam dunk that the Canucks will qualify Bear after the NHL draft next week. So, again, we don't know. His agent continues to talk with the Canucks about Bear. One thing is clear. The long-term injury to Bear has made his contract situation much tougher to deal with. So it sounds like they were going to give him the qualifying offer, which I think made a lot of sense. Like he was pretty good in his time here. But yeah, we'll see how that goes.
What happens if you draft Willander or somehow Ryan Buck? I doubt it. It's going to fall to you there. Can you imagine if you have that's a bit of a stretch to have high hopes that the guy fills in already, and then there's your Bear replacement.
Yeah, that seems like a stretch. Yeah, you probably got a year or two at least.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
So should we talk about some other? Let's talk about some other defensemen here.
Sure.
The Canucks have mentioned. So Noah Juulsen's name came up today. Rick Dollywell says UFA defenseman Noah Juulsen is a player the Canucks like, and they are talking to his agent about a new contract. Yeah. What do you think about Noah Juulsen?
I like him. I think I remember last week we were talking about, I believe, I don't want to put words in your mouth, that you like Burroughs more than Juulsen, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And I have them at 50. Like, I'm fine with either one. I like Juulsen. He's bigger and he's not afraid to hit and he doesn't take stupid penalties. But I do like Burroughs' kind of flexibility, versatility is a better word of putting it. And he just seems to be more of an NHL, like a number 7, mind you, but he seems to be more of an NHL D-man right now. But I don't mind Juulsen, and if he comes back and the money's right, I don't mind it.
I will say, I went to that one Abbey Canucks playoff game.
Yep.
Juulsen was noticeable. Like, he was throwing his body around. Like, he clearly was into it, and I liked that on his part. I mean, you look at his stats, he's played 68 NHL games across 3 teams at this point, right? 10 points, nothing to really talk about, but he's an even plus minus. That includes a +1 on the Canucks last year. That's pretty good on a team this bad. Obviously, very small sample size, but I mean, he had 20 points in 49 games for Abbotsford last year, most of them being obviously assists, and I'm sure quite a few of those came on the power play. But yeah, I wouldn't hate. Again, we're talking something near league minimum, right? Like something that can be 100% sent down to the AHL if need be. Maybe he's trying to push for like a one-way deal or something along those lines, or at least a pretty high AHL salary if it comes to that. But if you are a guy like Noah Juulsen or Kyle Burroughs, the Canucks are probably a pretty good team to pick, right? There's a path. There's a path to playing NHL games this year. Even if they do bring in some extra bodies, like, you're an injury away really from playing a handful of NHL games.
Yes. So you have Juulsen, you have Burroughs. Now, did you tell me that Burroughs was offered a contract, or there's speculation?
So what Rick Dollywall's thing says is, after a long period of no talks with unrestricted free agent Kyle Burroughs' agent Ross Gurney, the Canucks have reached out to Gurney and made a contract offer to the Langley native. So, yes, he has been offered a contract by the Canucks. Who knows if he takes it? He's an unrestricted free agent. Any other team could go after him. However, he's from here. He's played here for a while. The team's not great, so maybe he wants to go somewhere he can be like a number 7 and try to make an impact. But, again, there's no guarantee that you go to a different team and you become the number 7, right? You could be the number 9 for all we know, right? And just be playing in the AHL. And again, if you want to be an NHL player, the Canucks are probably a decent defensive core to be a part of.
Did Philip Johansson play in the playoff game that you were there?
I think he did.
Was he good? Do you remember anything?
He was fine.
I know Jeff Patterson keeps talking about the one game he saw him and said he was bad, but I don't know if you guys were at the same game.
So he played 3 playoff games. I don't remember, but if he was there, I didn't really recognize him.
Right.
I really like the idea of Philip Johansson. I mean, he was pretty good in the Swedish league last year.
Yeah.
Obviously, he has that first round pedigree, which, again, if I think he didn't have that, I don't know if I'd be as excited. Right.
Right.
That definitely puts a bit of a bias on it. But
sure.
He's 23. He'll be 24 at the end of the season.
Yeah.
We're sort of getting to crunch time for a guy like Philip Johansson. So it'll be interesting to see where he ends up this year.
So all these right shot guys that we're talking about in McCord, in Johansson, in Juleson, and Burroughs, and what about Jet Wu? I keep coming back to him because he's only 22 years old. We keep forgetting. Well, I keep forgetting how young he is.
He'll be 23 in like a month. So
okay, fine, 23 years old. Yeah,
but I also thought he was a little older at this point too. He's drafted back in 2018.
Yeah.
Jet Wu hasn't done much to impress me. Now, again, he's very physical, which I like. I just don't know if he has. I don't know if he has the pace to keep up in the NHL game. Right, like he's good. Like he's fine. He was good in the AHL. Right, 21 points. He had 96 pins last year. Yeah. In the AHL, which is good, I guess, but. I just don't really see it personally. Again, he could come to camp and he could impress, right? And with the amount of bodies the Canucks have, right? McWard, Hirose, Jet Wu, Wolainen, Juleson, Burroughs, Philip Johansson, Pettersson, right? Like, who knows? You only need a couple to click, right? You need a couple to break out and actually show up and win those battles and be good enough to compete for a spot.
Yeah.
But it feels to me like they have a lot of guys who are like probably a little low on the totem pole, right? They don't have enough guys who are like just about to push in. They have enough guys who are like, they're like a top 3 AHL D-man, right? And they'll probably stay around that level. So I'd love to see Jet Wu do that. I'm not, and same with Jack Rathbone, right? Like I'm just not super high on that happening.
And that's why these guys should be salivating. There is a spot on either side too with OEL gone. There's at least a spot on the right and at least a spot on the left. If we were talking about 7th and 8th defense, and there's probably 2 spots on either side that these players can go for. And by the way, Adam, thank you. Adam is joins the Canucks After Dark community officially as a supporter. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you,
Adam. Appreciate that. Yeah, that's awesome. And here's a name that we haven't even talked about yet is Travis Dermott, who we kind of all forgot about because he barely played this season. He's an RFA. Yeah. And has he done enough to even warrant a look, though?
Yeah. So Dermott was the sort of third-round swap with Hamonic, which, by the way, great move.
Yes.
But, yeah, he played 11 games in a Canucks uniform, 1 game in an Abbotsford Canucks uniform this year.
Oh.
I mean, 60 games last year.
See, he's a
concussion issue, right?
Yeah, I know. And I really like him. He's a legit NHLer. He is.
I think so. I think so too. I think he's a good third pair defenseman. Genuinely, who can like in a pinch slot in on PP2, like if he has to.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I think he's had a couple head injuries, right? At this point.
Yes.
That's scary, right?
Yes.
Like you don't know where that's going to be. It sucks for him, especially because this contract offer coming up probably isn't going to be huge. His qualifying offer is 1.75.
Yep.
Do you want to tie up? Again, it's not a lot of money. We were talking about Ethan Barrett 2.4, but are you wanting to contribute 1.75 to a guy who knows, right? I don't know. Is he supposed to be ready for this year? Have we heard anything?
We've heard nothing. Like, that's crazy.
There's been no rumors or anything on Dermott. So are you going to tie up that on him? And again, you're dipping more and more and more into LTIR most likely, with something that could just it could just spring up again, right?
Yep.
And then I think it's one of those things where if you're wanting to bring Travis Dermott back, you still have to fill his spot.
Mm-hmm.
Right, you can't just because with most guys you can pencil in like your top 6 on defense, right? It's like, oh yeah, Hughes is going to be your number 1. You're going to have Veronic, you're going to have Myers, etc. And you might want to say, okay, we're going to have Dermott as a number 6, but you have to have a contingency because there's a real chance that he comes back for 6 games and then is out again for 20, right? And that's a scary proposition.
Jeff Patterson put out a tweet today, Parker, saying of these 4 left shot defensemen,
Yep.
Hirose, Rathbone, Wolanin, and Breezeball. How would you rank them?
Yeah, I liked your ranking. So you
2 and
have
2,
Hirose
yeah.
and Wolanin up top
Together, yeah.
I'd have Wolanin as my number one. Not
Yep.
necessarily long term. Hirose might have a bit of higher ceiling in the future. Wolanin impressed me last year quite a bit. He was really good in his time, and in Abbotsford, like he was the clear cut number one.
Yes,
and was very obviously like, yeah, this guy might not belong in this league. Like he was very good out there. So Wolanin is definitely in my top of that list.
Is he a second pairing D-man? Because right now, then he slots in behind.
No, of course not. Like he might end up being, but he should not be.
Yes.
Yeah. He again, like we keep saying that, right? Like Canucks have a lot of like number 6, 7 defensemen, right? Because that's where you'd probably put Ethan Bear. That's where you'd probably put Travis Dermott. That's where Kyle Burroughs maybe a little bit below that. But I think the Canucks, they have a number 1, a number 2, and then like a number 4, and then a bunch of number 6, 7, 8s.
Right.
And that's tough.
Yes. Is it even worth spitballing? No, there's no point doing projected lineup because we got to see what happens in the next 2 weeks.
There's way
right?
too many holes, yeah. And it's not like the free agent class is very exciting either, right? Like,
it's so you're so true. Yes. Yeah, I looked it up. I looked it up today. It was not impressive. How about that? No. No, I'll just start naming names. No. The more impressive names are guys who still have 1 year left on the contract. Like I've heard people talk about Pesci and Hannafin, but these guys they still have $4 or $5 million left on their deals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
those aren't turning around anytime soon.
Yeah. Time to lace them up, Parker. Third line.
Yeah.
Third pairing D.
Yeah, definitely. I'll definitely be able to pull that off.
Can't remember. Are you righty or lefty?
Righty.
Oh, that's even better.
Yeah. Right. So there was other talk on 32 Thoughts today from Elliot Friedman. This is going to hurt. Quote, Friedman says someone reached out to him saying they think the OEL buyout might suggest the Canucks are trying to replicate what the Florida Panthers did in the playoffs, having, quote, a hot goalie and some studs. That same source told him Canucks are not going to be the only team to think, quote, get in the playoffs and cause some headaches.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm so excited to finish 10th in the West again.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually listened to the audio portion of the podcast, and they were talking about, obviously, no surprise here, in Demko, in Hughes, and PD, you have elite players. You can add Miller to that. And yeah, hot goalie. Demko has the ability to do that, but it really breaks down. The roster really breaks down after that.
Yeah, it does. Again, they have 3 defensemen.
Yeah,
that's not get in and cause some problems. Like that's not. They're not in that position right now. And again, they could make some stuff happen. They, get rid of Pavillier and bring in a few defensemen making $2.5 million and get some depth going. Like, sure, maybe.
Yep.
But it's not like they're like, oh, they're just one piece away from doing that. Like, yeah, it's and again, that relies on Thatcher Demko being Thatcher Demko again, right? Last year that wasn't the case, and maybe it was a little bit near the end of the year, right? He did finish with a 901, but he had like an 874 for a good chunk of the season, right? like he was not good in the first half of the year. So, there's a lot of things that really have to go right for this team to finish 3rd in the Pacific. Yeah. And it's like, hey, what then you're going to go up against Vegas or Colorado or Edmonton, like have fun, right?
Yes. So yes, and 2 points they made of the podcast referring to this Florida point, Parker. One of them was, remember last season, Florida was the President's Trophy winners. Then they dipped this year, but they're coming off of President's Trophies, so we're not doing that.
And what changes did they make? Well, they got rid of Huberdeau and brought in one of the best players in the league, Matthew Tkachuk.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Like,
exactly.
It's ridiculous.
And then they're talking about, okay, fine. The Canucks have their eyes set on a playoff spot. Who's falling out? Vegas isn't falling out. Edmonton's still pretty darn good.
Edmonton's not falling out.
I think LA and Seattle are pretty good. Calgary
LA,
is going to improve.
LA's on the upswing.
Yeah.
Edmonton, you know,
Yeah.
I would say LA maybe is the best candidate and
Yeah.
for Calgary to stay down. But like,
Yeah.
and again, yeah, not to mention Seattle, right? Seattle's pretty
Yeah.
good this year too.
They were.
Like, or what are they? The Canucks are like the sixth. They're the seventh best team in the Pacific right now.
Seattle's a
right?
very boring team. Seventh. Who's worse? San Jose and Anaheim. Sixth.
Yeah, it's our sixth.
Yeah. But I hear what you're saying. The point stands true.
Well, Anaheim will have Fantilli next year. You know, maybe they, who knows?
Fantilli.
Right?
Imagine a line of Fantilli, Zegras, and Terry.
That's some fun hockey they'll be playing.
Yeah.
Some fun. Are they all American? No, Fantilli's Canadian.
No, Fantilli's Canadian.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, Sea Loves came in second in WIHF Player of the Year. Yeah.
Yeah,
Behind
that would have been
Bedard.
cool. That would have been cool. Sealov's going to be a good player.
He'll be fine.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
He will be fine.
And then I think the only other note that I had Canucks related was Travis Green will be joining the New Jersey Devils I think
As
an
what?
assistant coach.
Okay.
They said the position vacated by Andrew Brunette, and I think he was an assistant in New Jersey.
Yeah, that's Brunette was a head coach, and then he moved to assist. Yeah,
He was the head coach in Florida, and
You're
then,
right.
but he was the interim head coach. And then they didn't keep him, even though he brought them to the President's Trophy last year.
Right.
And then they didn't keep him, and I guess that turned out okay because they made it to the Stanley Cup Final.
Yes. You know, some people. We're not going to turn this into a nostalgic show about Travis Green, but some would say that maybe he was in over his head as a head coach. Others would say he did fine for his first time, but proof is in the pudding. He hasn't worked in about 3 or 4 years.
That was been 3 or 4 years.
2 years?
What, 2 years?
2 years.
Really, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right.
It wasn't that long ago that
It feels
that
like
whole
it.
Booter thing wasn't it like a year and a half. Really,
Oh my gosh, you're right. It
yeah,
was
like it was
November
like
2021, December 2021.
December. Yeah, that wasn't that long ago.
2 years.
Yeah, it was a season
Not even
and a
2
half.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, no time doesn't make sense nowadays. It's a mirage. But yeah, now he gets to coach the other two Hughes brothers.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess I don't know what kind of coach he'll be, but maybe like
Yeah.
a defensive coach or something along those lines. But yeah, I think that might be a good spot, right? Might be a
Yeah.
good assistant, learn a few more
Yeah.
things, and then maybe he can come back as a head guy.
Speaking of time, Parker, did you see the tweet where the Louis Eriksson debacle, because obviously OEL traded for him. Now OEL is going to be on our books until 2031. Spans 3 decades, basically from the middle of the 20 teens. Yeah.
To 2031. Yeah. Mm-hmm,
15 years. 15 years spanning. Technically, it's a decade and a half, but it spans 3 decades because of where it landed. That's crazy. That's 2031.
Isn't it just fun thinking back to July 1st, 2016? And just thinking like, wow, 6x6, that feels like a lot. But hey, he scored a bunch of goals last year, right? And he's going to play with the Sedins. They're Swedish. They all played together in the Olympics or World Championship, whatever. Yeah, and then he scored on his own net. And then everything was downhill from there.
July 1, 2016. Do you remember, Parker? There were so many bad contracts. Okposo, Nilsson. There were all these guys that made basically $5 or $6 million for 5 or 6 years. It was brutal.
Yeah.
was
Yeah, no,
brutal.
I remember that day. That was a weird one.
Yeah.
And if I could go back in time, I'd probably go back to 2011. But still,
Okay, one more going back in time. Now, knowing everything that we know, Garland, OEL, 12 million in cap space, Dylan Gunther, someone else I'm sure I'm forgetting, a second round pick. Of course, we wouldn't do that trade, but at the time, 2 years ago, did you mind the trade at the time?
yeah,
You did?
I minded it a lot. We did a show that day,
Yeah.
and I think I railed on it.
And I said-
made it. And I made a video that day, and I referenced it in my video that I made about the OEL buyout. And I didn't even bother to go back on it. I just said, hey, click on the link.
Yeah.
I know what I said.
Right.
I said I don't get it,
Yeah.
and I still don't get it.
And I
it was
remember
a
saying,
terrible
yeah,
move.
I remember saying that maybe Garland will be hopefully the nice piece of the trade. Yes. Yeah. I do
Right,
remember
and I said that, and Garland's been worse than I thought he'd be. Right?
Yeah.
Like just to throw extra, salt in the wound.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, if you honestly, Garland for 11 or Garland for 9 at the time, I didn't love it, but I understood it. But OEL, then it's just OEL for Eriksson, Beagle, Roussel, and a second. That's awful, right? And that's where I didn't like it. Because OEL was done at that point. So
Benning obviously trying to save his job.
yeah, very clearly.
Yep.
And it has handicapped the team now for another 8 years. Isn't
Wow.
that great? So it's
I
10-year
was-
impact.
I was in a good mood when we started the show.
Well, let's take 5 minutes of your questions. Maybe,
Okay.
guys, let's get some fun, positive questions, right?
Positive questions.
It's June 19th. It's like almost summer, but it rained today.
Yeah.
Let's get some fun. Edmund asks, here's a fun question. Do you think Jim Benning will ever get another GM gig again?
Is that a fun question or a funny question? I say no. What do you say?
I bet he does. They all do, right? Like every single one of them comes back. Like Peter Chiarelli's still in contention for jobs, right? Like the Leafs interviewed Peter Chiarelli, didn't they?
Oh, sure,
Like-
sure.
Like what are we doing? It's crazy. It's crazy.
It is crazy. Good question. I'm just waiting. What's happening to Tucker Pullman? Well, I've heard a few things. They're saying he still wants to play, and it might not be concussion. It's actually more neck and whiplash issues. That's what I heard.
Interesting.
Yeah. Doesn't make it any better, but
Yeah, I was. That's what I was thinking. Like, is that better? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it is because like brain is scarier than neck.
Yep.
I think, but
yep.
man, it's not. It's not great.
Yep. Good question, Sion. Thank you. We have time for a couple more. Just put them in instead of save us from scrolling up. Just put it in again.
Yeah,
Type it in
yeah,
again.
yeah. I'm trying to scroll up, but there's a lot of other comments that are just
Which is great.
that aren't questions. Yeah, no, they're great
Yeah.
comments. That they're just not questions. Some of
yeah.
them. So I do like that you guys have some good conversations in the
Yeah.
in the chat. There's some draft related questions that I don't know enough about, so I'm not going to
Yeah.
bother. I could lie to you and just read off the elite prospects page, but I'll
Yeah.
save that for next week. Here's a few. Yeah, see Ryan asking about thoughts on Braden Yager. Again, I will do 2 hours of research on Monday before our show, and that's generous.
Okay,
And then
I'll
I might
try.
know who that is.
Here's one that we can answer. You think Alvin will be more careful on July 1st or be reckless like Benny? I don't think reckless is in Alvin's character.
They don't have the money to be reckless. Like
Yeah.
they literally cannot be reckless unless they just were like, oh, let's just go throw our $6 million at one guy,
Yeah.
and now we can't field the team, right? No, I don't. They don't have the money to go for a big splash, and there's not really many big splashes to be had, anyways. So I don't think it's a big issue.
Yep. Taylor asks, how many moves do the Canucks have to make to be a contender?
Well, let's this is a good question because let's look at it, right? Top 6 wise, the Canucks are okay. Maybe you want one more top 6 player, but like generally they're doing okay. It's the third line that has some holes.
Yep.
So let's say like a couple there, right? Maybe 2 moves there. Maybe throw Pugholzen on the third line, and you can piece something together.
Yeah.
And then defensively, they've probably have a number 1, a number 2 in Hronek, hopefully.
Yep.
Probably number 4 in Myers, but he'll be gone after next year unless they re-sign him to something cheap. But I kind of doubt that. But if it was for like right now, like they'd have to go get a number 3 defenseman, and then some good number 5 guys, essentially like 2 or 3 of them that can fill in that third line.
So we just talked about 5 or 6 moves there then.
And you probably want a backup goalie,
Yeah.
right? So it's probably 6 moves away.
Although I'm willing to let Seelovs and Martin battle it out.
Sure.
I really am. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Seelovs, again, I want Seelovs to play more games in the AHL because he's so young. Like, what is he? Is he 21? He's 22.
Yeah.
Like, that's so young for a goalie. Like, he turned 22 in March. So, like, take the year, play 40 games in the AHL. Let Spencer Martin be the backup. But that's also scary because Spencer Martin wasn't great last year. And if you're going to have a guy start 27 games while the other guy starts 55, You can't afford to have that guy put up an 880 on a team that's barely going to be on the playoff bubble anyways, right? You can't afford to just instantly lose 16 of those 27 games.
Right.
You need a guy who's going to be at least proficient enough to put up a 900 and hold his own.
Nope, that's fair. Ryan says top 3 wants. So we got to be realistic here. It's obviously it's so hard to predict because
Bedard.
Yes, exactly. So we could say Bedard, Fantilli, and Carlson, but we know that's not realistic.
Right.
You know, we know maybe 1 or 2 of those. Everyone's talking about these 4 defensemen now.
Yeah.
And Reinbacher, Willander. The guy's name who I can't say, Sandin Pelika. Yeah. And then
It's like
Simashev.
Pelican, but with an A at the end.
Oh, I like that. And then Simashev, who's a left shot guy who's still a couple years away. But yeah.
I want whoever drops, because someone will.
Yeah.
There's always a guy who drops, whether it was Cole Caulfield or whether it was Quinn Hughes. Like, there's always a guy who drops, and most people are right about them. So there's thoughts that maybe a Benson could drop, but most likely he's going top 7, right? It would take a big fall. Or a Mitchkov, but it's very unlikely, right? So it's probably going to be a guy like Willander, who's really been rising a lot. But as some players rise, other players might fall, and maybe you might get some potential there. So I don't really have any yet. Really, what I usually do during these drafts is I have the list, all the lists in front of me, and then as guys drop, I say, I hope we get that guy. Because there's that guy, lots of people like that guy. And that's what I did with Quinn Hughes, right? Like Quinn Hughes, that was exactly what that was.
Yep. BL2 says Ryan Leonard. I think that's his name.
Yeah.
Here's one. One more. Where was it? Do you think it'd be easier to move Beauvillier or Garland? Well, Beauvillier's only got 1 year left at 4.1. Garland's at 3 years at 4.9. So intuitively, you think Beauvillier would be easier to move.
But who would you rather have?
Garland.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So, I think that's, again, you probably can get more for Garland, although with the rumors that the Canucks have to pay to get rid of him, like, that's just run. Like, keep Garland, because I think he's worth the money he gets paid. The Canucks just don't have much money to go around. If you can get rid of Beauvillier for essentially nothing, which I think they should be able to, I think that's fine. I think, we saw it during that Horvat trade, like, and they got Beauvillier. But now it's like, they also had to take Beauvillier, right? Yeah. That sort of seemed to be a negative in that case. We don't know how that conversation went. If Alavine was saying, we also want this guy, or if the Islanders are saying, you're going to have to take this contract too. We don't know. But if you can get rid of him, that would be great, because I think you can use that cap space more effectively on the back end.
Well, then we just got to make sure that Atu Ratu turns out really good then.
That sounds unlikely too. But it would be cool. But he didn't look great this year.
Yeah, true.
All right. We did a great job filling out that hour. We went an hour and 3. So, folks, thank you very much for joining. If you missed any part of this, rewind back to the beginning. Make sure you subscribe. By the way, before we even think about wrapping up, hit the like button. We're at 24 with over 100 people. We have over 100 people in here in June. The Canucks have not played meaningful hockey in 3 months, and we have over 100 people in here. So hit the like button. That's amazing. Hit subscribe. Thank you all for joining us tonight. If you missed any part, you can rewind back to the beginning. You can find it on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all in about like 15, 20 minutes. But before that, Clay, do you have any parting words this evening? Well,
I'm glad you got back safely. I turned 49 years young this Thursday, so I'm looking forward to that. This is my favorite week of the year, Parker. It's the Father's Day. I'm a father, as you know. It's the first day of summer, although it's not feeling like it. And it's my birthday. So it's my trifecta, my tridium, as I like to say. So I'm excited for that. And I'm excited to do a bit of draft research so I'm not a complete tool on next Monday's show.
Yeah, so folks, get it in your calendars because next Monday, 10 p.m., we'll be doing our sort of draft preview show. And then I'll be doing a stream during the draft on the 28th. So we'll hang out during that. And maybe you'll join me. I don't know what your plans are.
I'm going to try and get my work meeting canceled so I can join you.
Good move. All right. And then we'll do something.
That'll be great.
So folks, make sure you subscribe to the Canucks After Dark channel. You can find me on YouTube, ParkersPucks, Twitter, ParkersPucks Clay, YouTube Canuck Clay, Twitter Canuck Clay. We try to keep the branding consistent. thank you all very much for joining us this Monday evening. And we will see you next week.